All right, ladies and gentlemen, finally, I get to do this spoiler-filled review of the Suicide Squad. There's so much I really want to do. I did this video like 100 million times because of that. The Suicide Squad, there's so much to say about it. So I'll try my best now to be as precise and concise as I can be about the Suicide Squad. First of all, what is the Suicide Squad, right? Well, as its name says, it's a group of individuals who go on special ops missions. But the missions are so dangerous that never ever in the history of the squad has every single member ever returned from the mission. That's why it's called the Suicide Squad. Suicide Squad, therefore, has members which change all the time because of the level of difficulty and danger in the missions that they go to. Throughout the comics and in animation, the Suicide Squad has been depicted as a group of mostly villains who are sent out on missions against their will. And if they complete these missions, they get reduced sentences of their times in prison. Now, the earliest versions of the Suicide Squad had some members that are even present in the movie today. And those members are Deadshot and Captain Boomerang. Deadshot and Captain Boomerang have been members of the Suicide Squad from its very inception, from its creation from the hands of John Ostrander. John Ostrander's vision was to take B-level villains and to carry them out on missions. And while they're going out on missions, for you, the reader, to see that they have a humanity to them. They are more than just villains who do certain tasks, but they actually have lives. And these lives are portrayed on the screen where you empathize with them and even you root for them. And so his comic book was revolutionary in that Suicide Squad was the first set of villains, a super squad of villains, where people could relate to certain aspects of their character and their lives. And people actually found themselves rooting for the villains. So this movie basically captures the essence of what John Ostrander was trying to do. In 1986, a particular character was introduced into the Suicide Squad comics, and there was a reboot of the Suicide Squad comics. This character was Amanda Waller, who was a government agent, and she had this idea of assembling a group of criminals to carry out these special ops missions. Inbuilt in this was deniability, as they were criminals, so that the government never had to testify that they were actually their own people sent out, as well as reduce the risk against other special ops forces. So these criminals were expendable. Amanda Waller is just a ruthless person who believes that the ends justify the means, and she does whatever it takes to get to the ends. She's also a very political figure, and she therefore plays political games to ensure that her interests are accomplished and not necessarily the interest of the people she has to account to in Washington and elsewhere. And this movie also takes those aspects of this character, Amanda Waller. Now, the Suicide Squad has been seen through the comics. It has also been seen in animation and animated features, as well as it has been seen in some video games, particularly associated with Batman. So you have the Batman Arkham Origins game, the Batman Arkham Origins Blacklist, and then we have this animated feature, Batman Assault on Arkham, which again features the Suicide Squad. But they also have seen at least Amanda Waller and some also members of the Suicide Squad, I even mentioned the Suicide Squad, in the Justice League Unlimited, which was a feature presentation, a series, animated series that was on TV, on the WB, and on other related channels. Now, I've been giving you all this background to the Suicide Squad. Here's some things that generally happen in Suicide Squad movies. One, all the members that are criminals that join the Suicide Squad generally have nanite bombs implanted into their necks. In the earliest versions of the Suicide Squad, they had some sort of bomb attached to their bodies. But in this particular version, 1986 and onwards, they would inject nanite bombs into their necks. And if they disobeyed orders, or they tried to escape, or they were insubordinate and tried to rebel, they would simply detonate those bombs in their necks and blow off their heads. In Batman Arkham Asylum and Batman Assault on Arkham, KGB Beast was basically the person who tested out the Amanda Waller's seriousness, and he got his head blown off. In this movie, Suicide Squad, that was Slipknot, who tried to escape, and he got his head blown off. So let's get into now the Suicide Squad movie that we saw as the feature film. Now, some people say that Assault on Arkham is a better film than this movie, Suicide Squad. I tend to disagree. I think that both films have their strengths and both films have their weaknesses. For instance, in Assault on Arkham, it's an animated film to start with. And animations, you have to have a dispensation of belief. You have to actually believe a lot more. Because in animated films, first of all, I didn't like the animation. I did like the plot, but I didn't like the animation too much. It wasn't seamless like live action, and it also was very kind of plasticity. And the other things that were not believable was seeing an explosion happen and still these guys, they somehow evade the bomb. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. But nonetheless, animated films generally do that. Like if you look at animated films or even animated video games, you see Batman, he's able to move at the same speed as Superman, but he has no kryptonite. That makes no sense. We know in the real world, in live action, Superman's a lot faster, a lot stronger than Batman, and so on. So I'm just saying, there are certain things about animated features which are kind of unbelievable, but you have to kind of stretch your belief to believe it. Also, I thought that the characters portrayed in Assault on Arkham were not as deep and not as well developed as the characters in Suicide Squad, the movie. And live action, there's something about live action where you bring these characters to life on screen in flesh and blood that just is much more appealing to me than just the Assault on Arkham. But I give Assault on Arkham kudos for their storyline and plot, which is a lot more elaborate than Suicide Squad. But I think Suicide Squad as a movie is on par with Assault on Arkham, even though its storyline and plot is very simple. So let's go into the review of Suicide Squad. Basically, Suicide Squad, the storyline is very simple. Amanda Waller wants to form Task Force X. The reason she wants to form Task Force X is because Superman has died and there has been a rise of metahumans in the world. And Amanda Waller is worried that the security of the nation would be in jeopardy if this metahuman were to use his powers adversely towards the world. So she has assembled a number of people with special abilities, skills, powers to be able to provide national security for the United States of America, because she is a loyal citizen of the United States. And she has gathered them in Belle Reve prison. Some of them are metahuman, some of them are human. And this squad is not only to handle those things, but it is also to handle special ops missions that the special forces may find a little too dangerous for them, that most of that squad would disappear. So that she instead would prefer if criminals, which are very expendable, could be used to do that job. So that, in essence, is the Suicide Squad movie. She sends out these, the squad is summoned for a mission. This mission is really to recon Amanda Waller, who is also in Mid-City. What happens is a metahuman threat happens in Mid-City, and the squad is recruited by the government to actually deal with this metahuman threat, but in fact they go to recon Amanda Waller. That was the real purpose behind it. But she gets in trouble and she's captured by the metahumans, and therefore they have to proceed to deliver her, save her from the metahumans, and in doing so they actually save the entire world, because they were not aware that the metahumans were trying to destroy the entire world until much later on in the movie. They all therefore get reduction in their sentences, those that survive, and they go back to prison. That's the basic storyline. It's very simple. But while the movie was very simple, there were a number of story arcs told by the different characters in the story that made it a lot more complex. It was really the character arcs and the nature and acting of the actors portraying these characters that made this story what it was. And we got some background in the characters, and then we got to know their story arcs. Now, the critics say that this film was muddled. They also say that it was morally murky and there were no complete story arcs. The reason why the critics say this is because this particular film doesn't have any heroes in it. This movie is unlike any other movie in that this movie is about criminals. It's about villains facing villains. Think of Predator versus Alien. Think of Chucky versus Freddy. It's a film where you have criminals versus criminals, villains versus villains. That is unusual. And to top that off, this movie is not from the perspective of a hero. There are no heroes in this movie. This is simply from the perspective of the criminals. So that at the end of the day, the only thing that discriminates between someone who is bad and someone who is evil is the evil person has no repentance and there is no chance of redemption for them in any way, shape, or form. Whereas a bad person, it may be remotely possible that they could turn at some point in their lives and become an anti-hero or a hero. And that's what we see in this movie. Now, this movie has some themes in it. One of them is honor among thieves. And truly, this group of individuals, some who have been solitary and they are introvert, and others who are social but they are crazy, they all come together, but the bonding really comes at a very significant point in the film. Of course, they bond as they fight because they have to fight as a team, and there are certain things that force them to have to come together because they need to survive, they need not to die, and the way they will not die is if Colonel Rick Flagg here, who's a principal member of the squad, he's the leader of the squad, if he's kept alive. And even though he had the insurance of Katana to protect him from the squad, he really needed more help, and he needed the squad to actually protect him from the droid armies that came at him from the metahumans. So let's get into the story arcs of each character. Now, like I said before, Deadshot is pretty much one of the original members of the Suicide Squad, and he's pretty much been with the Suicide Squad since its inception by Ostrander back in the 1960s, 1950s, somewhere there. And he's a staple, as well as Captain Boomerang. Now, in the Assault on Arkham, you had Deadshot, Harley Quinn, and Captain Boomerang, who had actually run a mission before that mission that Amanda Waller was sending them on. So that was the second mission in Assault on Arkham, which explains why they didn't really explain a lot about the characters, and they just went into the plot of the movie. In this movie, we had to introduce a number of characters, okay? First, we have the principals, which would have been Deadshot, Harley Quinn, and Rick Flagg, as well as Amanda Waller, who oversees everyone. So those were the principal characters. Then you had the secondary characters, which were Diablo, and he was very important to the movie. And then you had the supporting characters, which were Killer Croc, you had Katana, you had Captain Boomerang. Okay, these were the supporting characters. Slipknot was not really a supporting character because he didn't stay in the film for very long. And then you had the adversary, which was Enchantress. She went rogue. Okay. Now, in many respects, this movie was very much like, as I said before, Assault on Arkham. Same kind of storyline in the sense that one of the members of the Suicide Squad actually goes rogue. As a result of that, the Suicide Squad has to actually go seek out this member. In this case of Enchantress, that eventually happens. In the case of the Riddler, it happens immediately. Amanda Waller sends them to kill the Riddler, and that story has its twists and turns to it. But suffice it to say that let's look at the story arcs of all the characters now, and then after that, I'm going to try and go through their story arcs really quickly. So let's start with Deadshot. Deadshot, he begins the movie as a hitman. This is what everybody knows Deadshot for. That's what we see him in the games and so on. But we didn't really know, unless you read the comics, that he had a life. He actually had a child with a prostitute whose name was Zoe. And this movie goes into detail how much he actually is attached to Zoe. And he really wishes everything well for Zoe. And he also wants Zoe to respect him. So he's a hitman who he's had a child with a prostitute. This child is taking care of the prostitute. And this child is very brilliant, and he wants the best for his daughter, and he wants his daughter to respect him as a person. So that's how the movie begins. He gets caught in prison because he does not shoot Batman in front of his daughter. And Deadshot, it shows that Deadshot has some kind of small glimpse of a conscience. And then we see him in prison punching a bag. We see that he's resistant to authority, and as such, he does not mind fighting authority and taking the punishment for it. He's a fighter, and he has a death wish, just like typical comic book Deadshot. But the movie starts to evolve the character. The character moves from that to being recruited in the Task Force X. He meets the leader, Rick Flagg, and Amanda Waller, but he has no respect for Rick Flagg. He talks through him. He sees Rick Flagg as beneath him. And this continues as they are going on the mission until Rick Flagg threatens him when he blows off the head of Slipknot, who tries to escape. And then he says, "You want to be next, Deadshot?" And Deadshot takes this as a threat, and Deadshot therefore collaborates with Harley Quinn. And he tries to get the word spread around that he's going to kill Rick Flagg. So he starts off disrespecting Rick Flagg, and he moves on to wanting to kill Rick Flagg, to try to start a mutiny. But it so happens that Rick Flagg is very important to the squad. Amanda Waller, who talks to the squad via satellite, she says that if anything happens to Rick Flagg, if he dies, she's going to kill them all. And so it's very important that Rick Flagg survives in this movie all the way to the end. And Deadshot, on seeing the drones encompass Rick Flagg has his own soldiers also accompanying the squad. Seeing the droids capture him, Rick Flagg orders Harley Quinn, who's happy to see Rick Flagg die, to get him, because if Rick Flagg dies, then they all die. So Harley Quinn, in anger, she saves Rick Flagg, along with Rick Flagg's lieutenant, who happens to be Clint Eastwood's son. So, out of necessity, Deadshot saves Rick Flagg. But throughout the movie, Deadshot continues to belittle Rick Flagg and show him that he's not a leader, that Deadshot is better than him in every single aspect and way. So Deadshot goes storming into the building that Amanda Waller is in, and he moves to the command post, and Rick Flagg has to follow after him with his troops, and then everyone follows after. Deadshot becomes the unofficial leader of the group. So because of his contention with Rick Flagg, the group listens to Deadshot, and he becomes the unofficial leader. He has a particular relationship with Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn trusts him, so she's loyal to him. So she's like his first lieutenant, as Rick Flagg has his first lieutenant to him. And Deadshot continuously saves Rick Flagg's life throughout this movie, and he orders the other people to save him. In fact, to the point where Deadshot calls everybody in and they surround Rick Flagg, and he says, "Nah, you ain't gonna be shooting or doing nothing. We need you alive." And they shoot up the place. Then we see another aspect of Deadshot where he's an encourager, and he's like a coach, like Phil Jackson that he talks about with the triangle offense. He gets Diablo to use the powers that he was hesitant to use by getting into Diablo's head. Then afterwards he say, "I was just trying to get you there." So not only is he a good leader, not only is Deadshot proving to be someone who's honorable and trustworthy, but he's also showing the attributes of being someone that can encourage others to do what is necessary at the time to get the job done. So he's becoming a very big asset to Rick Flag. But as the movie progresses, again, Deadshot, they complete the mission. They recover or recon Amanda Waller, who didn't really need them to recon her, but nonetheless. And then he sees how ruthless Amanda Waller is, killing all of the agents in there because they didn't have clearance. And he wonders if he's really a bad guy. She seems to be even dreader than him. However, as they reach the place where Amanda Waller is to be dropped off, the Joker, he confiscates Amanda Waller's helicopter that she's supposed to be using, and he rescues Harley Quinn from the squad. They deactivate the detonation device for her neck. As she goes away, Amanda Waller orders Deadshot to kill Harley Quinn because Amanda Waller is ruthless. And Deadshot purposely misses Harley Quinn to give her a chance because he doesn't have any beef with her. And again, showing that Deadshot is more loyal to the team. He's a very trustworthy person to each member of the team, and it shows his affinity to the team that he's now leading. So not only is Deadshot a good leader, not only is Deadshot an encourager that gets people to do certain things, but now we see Deadshot as someone who's trustworthy, and he is obligated to his team to protect his team. We then see Deadshot in one more set of lights. He clashes with Rick Flag when he realizes that Rick Flag and Amanda Waller have not been telling the truth about the mission they were really supposed to be on. And as Rick Flag has to recon Amanda Waller, who gets captured by the drones and knocked down by the metahuman Incubus, which is actually Enchantress's brother. Deadshot confronts Rick Flag and causes Rick Flag to pour out the truth, to the extent to which when Deadshot goes up to take a drink and everyone follows him and the soldiers of Rick Flag sort of forsake him, being discouraged that Rick Flag had actually hid this from the whole group, that Rick Flag comes pursuing after Deadshot, puts all his cards on the table, tells him everything, including that he has been holding letters of Deadshot. And this prompts Deadshot to realize that for his daughter's sake and for the respect of his daughter, he's going to complete this mission. Of course, Rick Flag put everything on the table in the sense that he also revealed his relationship and his interest in really reconning Amanda Waller, which really was his love interest, which was June Moon, who was now possessed by Enchantress. And so Deadshot is able to respect Colonel Rick Flag for being so honest and transparent, and he can feel to some degree how Colonel Rick Flag feels. So there's mutual respect between them, and Deadshot decides to do this mission to accomplish it so that he can tell his daughter about it. And Colonel Rick Flag, he respects now Deadshot. He didn't respect him in the beginning of the movie. And you see the both of them fight side by side. You see Deadshot being the leader of the group, even though Colonel Rick Flag was the strategist. Deadshot is the leader of the group by the end of the movie, as Colonel Rick Flag looks to him to decide if he should detonate a bomb and sacrifice Diablo in this movie. Deadshot and Harley Quinn help Diablo. It's like a therapy session in the barroom to come to terms with who he is and what he has done, and not be afraid to use his powers of being a pyrotechnician, one who could shoot fire from himself. And so because of Deadshot and Harley Quinn, Diablo goes fully into himself, fully evil, to be able to tackle a greater evil and to save the team, who he now accepts as a family. So Deadshot moves up from just being, his character arc starts off being a hitman for hire. And it comes deeper when we realize he has a relationship with his daughter, where he wants his daughter to respect him, and he wants to make sure she gets the best she can have in life. We move from that to seeing Deadshot as one who feels that Rick Flag is inferior to him, to coming to the point where he hates Rick Flag and wants to kill him, to coming to the point where he has to save Rick Flag, and in doing that, continuously having to save Rick Flag, he is becoming a leader of the team, and the team is following him. He becomes a leader that gets the team to do things that they wouldn't normally do, like Diablo shooting fire. He also is a leader of the team because he's honorable to them. And this is the Honor Among Thieves theme, where he is loyal to them. He would not kill Harley Quinn. He would not reveal their secrets. And he's so good that he gets people to open up and talk the truth. He gets Rick Flagg to talk the truth. He gets Diablo to tell the truth about himself. And therefore there's a catharsis. And because of that, there is a sort of bond or friendship amongst them after the barroom scene. He has a friendship with Rick Flagg, or mutual respect. Not so much a friendship, but mutual respect with him. And because of that, he goes on to become the absolute leader. In fact, he's the one that actually destroys the machine that Enchantress was building. And he's the one that almost gives them the complete victory. Rick Flagg finishing it off by causing Enchantress to at least not exist inside of June Moon's body anymore. So this whole movie centered around Deadshot. His story arc is wonderful. It actually ends where he begins. He goes back into prison, but he has some time off his sentence. He's punching the bag, but at 1 minute you see him hug the bag, which is a little bit different to what he was doing at the beginning of the movie. So he did make a journey, even though his arc returns him to whence he started. Now when we look at the other characters we have, I'm going to try and do them as quickly as possible. We'll go with the other principal character, Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn, she had a tight relationship to the Joker, and she saw him, she really loved him. She loved him so much that he went crazy for him. And she's really a crazy individual. She's spontaneous. She's very unpredictable. That's the danger of Harley Quinn. Deadshot is known for his accuracy. Harley Quinn is known for her crazy. Yet Harley Quinn is very loyal to those people who she realizes are trustworthy. And Deadshot proved to be trustworthy when they came together, and Harley Quinn in the helicopter was giving message by the Joker. And Deadshot kept the secret, so she kind of trusted Deadshot. In fact, she called him a friend, like the Joker was a friend. And Harley Quinn was very loyal to Deadshot. She was like his lieutenant. Anything Deadshot did, she would reinforce it. If Deadshot told her to do something, she would do it. However, Harley Quinn in the beginning of the movie was not like that. When she was in prison, she said, I do what I want, when I want, with who I want. She was very rebellious, fighting all the time. But now we see Harley Quinn move from that crazy, rebellious person into someone who's accepting orders and loyal to Deadshot, as she was loyal to the Joker. Now, after the Joker died, Harley Quinn's world basically went to bits, because she was living basically for the Joker, and her world went to shreds. And you could see that as she stood on top of a car, she sat on top of a car, and she threw away her necklace. Now, the necklace says pudding, Joker's pudding. So her world kind of crumbled. Deadshot was the guy to pull her down. Deadshot took care of Harley Quinn. He looked out for her, because she was a little crazy. Even though Harley Quinn she's crazy in the head, like Joker. Dangerous crazy too. But Deadshot would always look out for her. You'd hear him saying, hey, Harley, hey, Harley. But Harley still would go off, and she's fearless and she's crazy. So she would just go off in the elevator, and everybody would just know where she went, and she's just gone. You know what I mean? So Deadshot had to be chasing after, making sure she's safe. When the Enchantress was saying, come out of the shadows, my dear, and I won't hurt you, Harley Quinn was the first to just impulsively want to go. And Deadshot had to hold her back again. So Deadshot was kind of her protector, protecting her from her own self, because Harley Quinn is not someone who has fear at all. She just goes into anything, any situation. You don't care. You know, she's crazy, right? But even so, as the movie continues, we see Harley Quinn reinforcing what Deadshot would say to the rest of the group. Hearing her say, aren't you guys coming? Pussies, if they didn't come. And that kind of thing. She's very fearless. Now, the other thing about Harley Quinn was we really saw that she wasn't just a crazy person in the movie for comic relief. In the barroom scene, you saw Harley Quinn really deal with a very poignant moment. And this involved Diablo, it involved Captain Boomerang, it involved Deadshot, and it involved Killer Croc. In this particular scene, after Rick Flagg tells the truth about the situation, how he screwed up on Amanda Waller, and this is why they're in this predicament, and the squad realizes what they're up against. As they sit down drinking, as with all people, when you sit down drinking, the truth comes out. And in a conversation Deadshot had with Diablo, Diablo tells the truth about his past and why he does not like to use his powers, which was that he killed his wife and his children when he got angry. It was so horrific to hear this, but truth be told, Harley Quinn said to him, own that shit, own it. And what she meant was, you have to embrace that you did this evil, and that's just a part of you, and continue on with your life. And Captain Boomerang was so horrified by that he said to Harley Quinn, every time you open your mouth, you always cause more trouble. He said, you look beautiful on the outside, but you're really ugly on the inside. Harley Quinn says, we all are ugly on the inside. Except for him. Killer Croc, she points to, he's ugly on the outside too. Which was pretty funny. And Killer Croc, he says, no, shorty, I'm beautiful. Which was just awesome. Because Killer Croc is basically saying, I accept my ugliness. And she says, very true. Because beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And
I'm going to church.
Okay, mommy. And basically this movie was trying to get people to understand, even though Harley Quinn did give incomplete advice and bad advice, to be honest with you. But it helps us to get into the psychological mind of the criminal. How they think. They accept themselves for who they are. The villainous side of them and the good side of them. And that was the commonality that all of them in the room, except for Katana, really had. And Katana, to some degree, she had a pain about her husband being killed, so she kind of shared it to some degree. But of course, Colonel Rick Flagg came in and he laid all his cards on the table with Deadshot. Harley Quinn afterwards, spontaneously, after Deadshot goes and says, I'm definitely going to you to the nth degree to do this, Harley Quinn says, just spontaneously, I'm going. I ain't got nothing better to do. She looks at the others and says, you coming? Pussies. And she leaves, okay? What's interesting about this whole thing is Harley Quinn is like the lieutenant of Deadshot. She kind of reinforces what Deadshot is doing, and the whole team follows her. And at the end of the movie, we see Harley Quinn playing a pivotal role. She was basically following along with Deadshot. She was doing that, but then she volunteered her services in the final act where she completely betrays Enchantress and chops out her heart. Harley Quinn's fearlessness plays a role, and her unpredictability in moving as if she's siding with Enchantress, and then she's the critical member that stabs out her heart. Nobody else was going to do that, okay? Only Harley Quinn, a crazy woman, would do something crazy like that, okay? And she chops out her heart because she wants to really get back to Joker, and Enchantress says she could do that. So Harley Quinn brings up another issue which makes a lot of sense. The world doesn't really love us. Why are we doing this for them? Which was a very good logical reason, and she makes sense. And she goes to Enchantress, but instead of joining Enchantress, she cuts out her heart, and then she throws the gun to Deadshot, who is, again, as I said before, the official leader of the group now. He's not the official, but the unofficial leader of the group, and he shoots the bomb to destroy the device, weaken Enchantress. So Harley Quinn story arc starts off mad, crazy lady, rebellious. You see her move from being rebellious to very loyal because of friendship. And this movie explores friendship versus leverage. Honor among thieves is the basic theme. So we see Harley Quinn move from being someone who is being leveraged to someone who is building a friendship with Deadshot because of trust, which begins everything. And then she goes through the arc to becoming the lieutenant and loyal to Deadshot. Whatever Deadshot tells her to do, she does it. And then from there, she moves on to become that psychologist, that wise mind giving knowledge. And she basically conducts this therapy session in the barroom amongst everyone. And she also reflects the sentiments of everyone when Colonel Rick Flagg comes in. She says, we don't want you here. And she moves from that to the next level where she actually volunteers her services and sacrifices herself for the team and chops out Enchantress's heart. Even though she'd probably be the least likely member of the team to do that, you would think, but because of her unpredictability and her craziness, she's just likely to do it. And so at the end of the day, Harley Quinn is able to take down Enchantress, or help the members of the team take down Enchantress. And even though she ends back in prison with her espresso machine and Joker breaks her out, she has actually completed an arc where she has gone from being looked at as crazy to being someone who is knowledgeable and wise. She has gone from someone who has been rebellious to authority to someone who has been loyal to authority. And also, she is someone who steps up for the team because she's formed this bond, this relation, this commonality between all the members. And she basically takes a risk, which is typical Harley Quinn, and she's able to destroy the villain because she takes that risk. So that's the arc of Harley Quinn. When we look at the arc of Colonel Rick Flagg, who's another major player, Colonel Rick Flagg doesn't think of these criminals as anything worth the while. However, Colonel Rick Flagg is the first person to treat Killer Croc as a human being in this movie. Before that, Killer Croc was seen as an animal, a wild animal, which was very dangerous. Colonel Rick Flagg was the first person to speak to Killer Croc as a person. And we can see almost instantaneously Colonel Rick Flagg, he's a very, very good leader. And he's an effective leader. And he knows how to speak with the people he's about to lead. You see him speak with Diablo in a very friendly manner. Colonel Rick Flagg is an excellent special ops officer. He's the best that the United States of America has to offer. But yet he has this gridlock between him and Deadshot throughout the movie. He doesn't think of Deadshot as much. He thinks of him as a coward and just someone who snipes people for money. He's wrong about Deadshot when he sees Deadshot rise to the occasion and destroy all of those drones, and we realize how fantastically skilled the man is. And Deadshot tells him, that's how I cut and run. And of course, Deadshot wanted to kill him initially, but then Deadshot saves his life out of obligation a number of times, and the whole entire squad saves his life as a number of times as well as he's carrying out his mission with his soldiers. Mind you, some of the soldiers that split it up into another group, they were taken over by drones, some were killed, and those soldiers were converted into drones themselves by Enchantress. So Colonel Rick Flagg, his opinion that special ops alone would have worked, they absolutely would not have survived without the Suicide Squad, without Diablo burning out all those drones and clearing out the whole place so they could continue on their journey. So Colonel Rick Flagg realizes this squad is something special about them. But still, when he finally recons Amanda Waller, he says, but I deal with precision. This thing was all about luck. But Amanda Waller says, but you must admit, there was no way you would have accomplished this task without this set of squad, this set of humans. Now we know that Colonel Rick Flagg didn't care about the criminals because he destroyed Deadshot. And he was using, in the beginning, not friendship and trust, but he was using leverage to keep the criminals in line. But he would move further on in the film, and his story arc would actually change to one of trust. After Deadshot confronted him to tell the truth about the situation, and Colonel Rick Flagg realized that his leverage would no longer work for him to carry out the further part of the mission, confronting the metahumans, he laid all his cards out on the table and he told the truth, everything, to Deadshot. And he convinced Deadshot to help him, and they had mutual respect for each other. And one thing that Colonel Rick Flagg did was he destroyed the detonation device for the bombs in their necks. He said, you're free to go if you want to go. In other words, he was letting it all hang out. Of course, Captain Boomerang took up the offer immediately and left, which was pretty funny. And Harley Quinn, she turned around to leave, and then she changed her mind. And that is very interesting because we will talk about Captain Boomerang and Slipknot in a minute. But suffice it to say that Colonel Rick Flagg, he laid it all out on the line because he knew he needed the squad. So he came from thinking of them as useless and criminals, looking down on them, to respecting them, to needing them. And from there on in, the squad worked side by side. There was a bond formed, a sort of like a brotherhood, a bond between him and these criminals, and they fought side by side against the metahumans and prevailed. In fact, Colonel Rick Flagg abdicated his position on certain decisions, deferring them to Deadshot, such decisions as life and death with Diablo. He would confer with Rick Flagg, and Rick Flagg would have he would confer with Deadshot, and Deadshot would have the final say on such matters. It was a fantastic movie in that we saw the difference between having leverage and having friendship and building bonds. And this man actually appreciates honor among thieves because, in a manner of speaking, Colonel Rick Flagg was also a thief. He had stolen, he had lied to the squad about what really happened and why they needed to go and recon Amanda Waller again. So that's Colonel Rick Flagg's story arc. In fact, his story arc ends with him carrying Deadshot to see his daughter and having the common decency to stop the prison officers from arresting Deadshot, giving him extra time. So Colonel Rick Flagg became really a true leader, only allowing his leadership to work if it was going to be effective. He allowed Deadshot to lead the squad. He started off hating these people and thinking they were useless, to respecting them, to needing them, to embracing them fully. In fact, when Deadshot shot that shot that destroyed the machine, he actually embraced Deadshot and he said, "Man, good shot, man." And Deadshot actually pushed him off and said, "I don't do hugs." And he ended up, in honor and quote and loyalty to Deadshot, escorting him to see his daughter. So Colonel Rick Flagg, that's his story arc. And then we have Diablo, which had a beautiful story arc. His story arc was about it was a very sad story where he's born with the gift to be able to create fire. And the more evil he did was the more his powers became stronger. And he would do all these evil things and run gangs and so on. And it didn't bother him, but his wife was like his conscience. And one day he did something where she just could not tolerate it and she was ready to leave. And he got in a fit of rage and he basically incinerated her and the children. He killed his wife and children. And because of that, he did not want to use his powers anymore because he did not want to lose it again and hurt anyone else and destroy them. However, when he entered into prison, some people attacked him and he again used his powers and destroyed everyone, reinforcing in his mind that he never wanted to use that powers again. So that when he was recruited and in the heart of battle, he would move away and make sure he's not involved in the battle. And he said it would be better this way. And it took not only the heckling from Captain Boomerang. Captain Boomerang started heckling Diablo from the day they landed. He started heckling him about his tattoos. Then he heckled him about not using his powers and calling him a prima donna. But it was Deadshot who, talking about that Phil Jackson triangle offense, Deadshot that got him to use his powers. And when he used it, he pretty much obliterated, this brother obliterated all of the droids that were trying to attack them. And then later on, in his confession in the barroom, talking about how he killed women and children, it was that session which Harley Quinn basically hosted, and Deadshot sort of initiated that, brought out the truth from him, where he was able to realize he was just like these people he was in the room with. There was kind of brotherhood among them, and also that he should embrace who he is and be who he is. And that to some degree is good, but of course you don't embrace the evil of yourself and don't want to change from being an evil person. But in this case, she gives him kind of the bad advice to continue to be evil. And you hear Deadshot saying the same sentence, "Stay evil, dollface," right? So these guys are not good people, okay? But you were still going to identify with it in terms of embracing the good and bad about yourself. And from that point on, Diablo, for the first time, starts to use his powers for the team willingly. He willingly gives his life fighting against Incubus. He uses his pyro powers. He says, "Oh, you guys gonna really see who I am." And he goes full out. And he turns into this big, tremendous, demon-like flame thing. And he goes against Incubus. And he basically gets Incubus into the corner where they need to detonate the bomb. And they detonate the bomb and kill him and take down Incubus with him. They blow up both him and Incubus. So his character arc moves from being hesitant to use his powers, starting to use his powers because he's been provoked, to using his powers full blown out because he realized he needed to accept who he was. And these group of people were willing to accept him for who he was. and so he found a home and family with them. That was his basic story arc. A wonderful story arc again. Very, very wonderful. Now let's play off of that to a character that symbolized what the squad wanted to do in the beginning, which was all of them wanted to run away in the beginning, and that was Slipknot. Slipknot and Captain Boomerang pretty much symbolized what the squad wanted to do. They didn't want to be under control of anybody. They didn't want to be leveraged. And Slipknot, he basically tried to escape in the beginning. Captain Boomerang had arranged with him. Captain Boomerang created a distraction. Slipknot got out of there, and he got his head blown up for it. When you look at Captain Boomerang and you look at Killer Croc and Katana, Captain Boomerang, first of all, he was a loner, but he did not have honor among thieves. He was a backstabbing kind of guy. And as the movie progresses onwards, we see that Captain Boomerang still stays to himself, still tries. He's like the real coward that Rick Flagg was talking about. He tries to avoid having to fight. He's trying to find the easy way out, make sure that he doesn't do anything but escape if he could. And instead, the war comes to him, the droids come to him, he still has to fight, uses boomerangs and so on. So he's angry, so he looks at Diablo and he blames Diablo for doing nothing because he had to do something even though he wanted to do nothing like Diablo. You know, he's two-faced. Later on in the movie, we see him trying to kiss up to Deadshot because he realizes Deadshot is the leader, so he could probably work something out to get away. And Deadshot has none of that. And then later on in the movie, we see his true nature. The barroom scene where he's horrified at what happened with Diablo, and he asks questions because he couldn't believe that Diablo was that evil, and the thing he had done was so evil. And he starts to attack Harley Quinn, and he says to Harley Quinn that you always cause more trouble when you speak. And he says, you know, you look beautiful on the outside, but you're ugly on the inside. And that's where Harley Quinn gets to express a sentiment that all of them know, and that is that they all are ugly on the inside. They all are. And Killer Croc, he says, I'm beautiful. And that's a beautiful thing when you can accept that and embrace it for yourself. This is her way of saying it. Of course, it's bad advice. You don't want to stay ugly on the inside. You want to do something about that. And if you're a person who wants to do good in this world, while you understand where you're at and be realistic with it, you work to be a better person, but not criminals, right? So they stopped right there. So anyway, the point is that Captain Boomerang, after having that little talk with the team and realizing he's just like every one of them, he feels a sense of belonging there as well. So even though he skips out of there when Colonel Rick Flagg says, you're not obligated to stay, kind of expressing what the group would have had before, you realize that most of the group stay. And Captain Boomerang, when he runs his separate way, realizes he's alone, and he realizes really he's better off being with the team. So he becomes a team player. And the guy, because he was honest in the barroom scene, he now truly starts to fight with the team. In fact, he volunteers his service by throwing a drone boomerang to be able to scout out the area. And then he fights alongside the team. In fact, he puts himself in jeopardy a number of times fighting against the metahuman, the huge metahuman Incubus, throwing his boomerangs and trying to attack him, instead of looking to sneak away from the fight like he did initially. So he really came full circle. Of course, he still threatened Amanda Waller a couple times, but he didn't want to follow through on the threat. And he ends up in prison where he wants to get out as usual. But his story arc basically moves from a loner and backstabber and person who's all about self-preservation to one who becomes someone who tells the truth. Someone who finds belonging among a squad, puts himself in jeopardy for the squad, and also volunteers his services to the squad because he finds a home amongst the squad. Really wonderful how Captain Boomerang's story arc is. And then we have Killer Croc's story arc. And Killer Croc, basically, he was chased out of Gotham by Batman, and he finds refuge in the sewers outside, but he doesn't find refuge for very long. They catch him and they bring him to Belle Reve. But really, he asked to come to Belle Reve because there, at least, even though he's treated like an animal and a freak, he's not doing anyone any harm, and he's getting free meals every day, which is what a crocodile would want, right? But he's still seen as an animal until Rick Flagg meets him and treats him like a man. And therefore he starts to talk to Colonel Rick Flagg. He says, "Why aren't you afraid of me?" And Colonel Rick Flagg says, "Well, why are you in here?" And he says, "I asked to be in here." And he moves from trying to find refuge and sanctuary in Belle Reve prison, even though they did take him down outside of there and carried him to Belle Reve. They shocked him because he was trying to eat someone. And anyway, the point is, Killer Croc, he finds a home amongst the squad. This is the essence of it. You see him laughing when Boomerang is teasing Diablo. You see him admiring Amanda Waller, who's the leader of the squad, saying, "I like her for her ruthless attitude." You see him in the barroom scene, which is the catharsis scene, the therapy scene, where he says, "I'm beautiful," right? "Not me, shorty, I'm beautiful." And you see him for the first time volunteer his services. He was the muscle of the group. He would stand up for the group against Rick Flagg, but now you see him volunteer his services when the special services are going to go underground in the water to get a bomb. And he says, "I'm not asking you to go with you. I'm telling you I'm going with you." And he's critical in getting the bomb and getting the first lieutenant of Rick Flagg to get the bomb detonated. He swims, gets the bomb, he gets intercepted with some drones, and he gives the bomb off to the first lieutenant, who he detonates the bomb eventually and destroys Incubus. Now, the point is, we start off with Killer Croc, who is like an animal. He's treated like an animal, and he's seeking refuge in Belle Reve, but he's treated like an animal. He moves from that point to being comfortable among the squad so much that he talks more like a man. You hear him talking a lot more. All because of Colonel Rick Flagg's first response to him, and then how they treat him amongst themselves. They don't tie him up. They don't restrain his mouth. He gets to wear clothes. So Killer Croc becomes more and more human in this movie. You see him express himself among thieves, the honor among thieves, talking about how beautiful he is. And then you see him volunteering his services. And then you see him fighting alongside the squad. He was the muscle for the squad, and he was kind of antagonistic to Rick Flagg, but now he's working along with Rick Flagg. He's working along with the special forces. He's defending the squad against Enchantress, bashing her all around and just beating her up because he has super strength. So we see this metamorphosis from animal to man, and also we see his final refuge is with this squad of soldiers. And he finds a haven among them because he has a commonality with them. Now, we also have Katana. Katana is like Rick Flagg, but she's even worse. She hates criminals. She wants to kill them in the drop of a dime. Harley just tries to greet her, and she's ready to kill Harley. The squad decides to turn on Amanda Waller. She decides that she wants to kill the squad. So she's she despises criminals. She almost kills Captain Boomerang with the sword as well. Rick Flagg tells her to back off. But she moves from hating the squad to respecting the squad and fighting along them to protect Rick Flagg. And then later on, she really honors the squad and goes with them when she realizes that Colonel Rick Flagg and Amanda Waller wasn't telling the squad the whole truth, and that Rick Flagg actually had lied to the squad to some degree, because he was saying, that they were really going to get a dirty bomb, etc. And so she sides with the squad. She goes up to get a drink with the squad, but she discriminates herself from the squad in that she's not a criminal, and she makes that very clear. And her story arc also has to do with the background. She hates criminals because her husband was killed by one, and she ended up killing that criminal, avenging her husband, and taking the sword he had. And that sword holds all the souls of people in it. So that we see her as she's about to embark on this very dangerous mission, which is to face these metahumans, which is an ominous task. You see her speaking to her husband in the sword, and telling him if she has to meet him, she does not mind. That's how dangerous the mission was. And so we see her story arc go from despising criminals to working with them to honoring and respecting them because of the dishonorable thing that Colonel Rick Flagg and Amanda Waller did to them, to fighting alongside them and defending them. She was there, her purpose was to defend Colonel Rick Flagg and Amanda Waller because they're not criminals. Well, not criminals in inverted commas, let's put it that way. But they turned out to be just as bad as the Squad. They're like the Dirty Dozen for real. Amanda Waller, her hands are dirty, so is Rick Flagg's. Katana, anyway, fights along with the Squad in the final fight, really taking on Enchantress quite a lot. And she becomes united with the Squad. We have a brotherhood of soldiers. Now, the last character and the last character story arc we need to talk about is Enchantress. Her story arc is very sad. She actually was a god to humans. She was from another world. She came to this earth and she had her humans that used to worship her and her brother Incubus. She was a witch. However, time passed and humans now were controlling her. She was now slave to Amanda Waller. She had just been a shell of what she used to be. She used to be a glorious royal figure. And Incubus used to be a glorious royal figure as well. And she also, like Amanda Waller and Colonel Rick Flagg in the beginning, only knows how to leverage people's weaknesses. And so, unfortunately, she is by herself and alone. Because she's good at manipulating, but she's not good at building friendships. So as a result of that, she's able to manipulate the situation that Amanda Waller has with Rick Flagg and June Moon, because she's able to see the desires of a person and create the illusion that these desires are being met, and so control the person. So that's how she controlled Rick Flagg long enough to delay him from calling Amanda Waller. And she can teleport, so she teleported to Amanda Waller's residence, realized her heart was in a guarded, so she couldn't get the heart. So she went looking around Amanda Waller's residence, and her brother called out from a vial, and she was able to save her brother and put him into a human form, and then let him eat up humans so he could get strong enough in Midway City. And he wreaked a lot of havoc, and because he wreaked so much havoc, it made news in Washington, and the Washington realized there was some meta-human presence there. So what better squad to send out but Task Force X? So they sent out Task Force X to do the job. So all of the people from the Suicide Squad are recruited, but Amanda Waller and Rick Flagg, they take June Moon to the site, knowing that Enchantress is their key tool. They decide to release Enchantress, and when Enchantress is released, she 2 times them and bolts out of there. Amanda Waller tries to control the situation by destroying Enchantress's heart, but her brother is right there to give her all the strength she could have, even though she doesn't have a heart. Her brother is able to strengthen her. And because she gets so strong, they're able to work together, she and her brother, to almost reinstate the glory that they had before. And she decides to use machines that the humans seem to worship today to destroy any sort of enemies that could be dangerous to her, and therefore have humans worship the machine and therefore worship her. So she was getting to glory days. She really was, with her brother. They're very glorious. They looked very fantastic. She was doing her witchcraft and stuff to build this machine. And then the Suicide Squad came. She even captured Amanda Waller, was able to take back her heart. So she was almost 100% there with her goal. And then the Suicide Squad came, and she tried to give them an offer to join her. They would not join her. And instead they started to fight her. They took out her brother, first of all, who was the closest thing to her. And she had that humongous loss. You could hear her scream out when her brother was dead. And then after that, she then lost the machine, and therefore all her powers were stripped. She was fighting the Squad and so on, and she had exceptional powers as a witch, but she was no longer as glorified as she was before. When the machine was destroyed, she lost almost all her powers, and she was almost like a mortal. And then Colonel Rick Flagg killed her by destroying the heart. At least we think he killed her, because at the end of the movie we see that the existing metahuman, she's the first metahuman in the files that she sends to Bruce Wayne. That's Amanda Waller. So that's basically Enchantress's very fatalistic storyline. She rises to glory through manipulation and through trickery. She has a brother alongside her, and then she is destroyed by trickery and deception from the Squad. So it's a very sad story for her, a tragic story. Of course, I don't believe she's dead. I think she kind of turns back into a kind of spirit dust thing, and her heart too. And I think she's just going to exist in Incubus, the same thing. And I think if you can catch them in a vial, store them up in a vial somehow, gather them together, again, she can possess another human and start it all over again. So I really think that Enchantress is going to be around. Now, the other player in the Suicide Squad, their story arc is Amanda Waller. Amanda Waller is typical Amanda Waller. She is a government agent. She plays politics. If a butt is in trouble, she's really going to save her butt first. And this is what happened here. She and Rick Flagg screwed up. She sent Enchantress in to contain the situation. The situation went out of control. Washington saw that. Was like, why is the situation not under control? Amanda Waller is aware of that. So therefore, but she's running all kinds of tests. She's testing out all kinds of things. She tested out the squad to recon her. She could have gotten out of there. She didn't. She was watching Enchantress to see how Enchantress can make armies and how that could work for the American government. So she was studying Enchantress. She was studying how the squad was doing. And even though she was captured and Enchantress used her to get intel, after Enchantress was destroyed, Amanda Waller seemed to have still information about Enchantress that the rest of the group didn't know about, and she probably has a use for Enchantress when she gets her back and gets her under her control. And she, of course, incarcerates all the members of the squad that survive, and she has them on standby. You hear her say to Bruce Wayne, she indicates to Bruce Wayne that she knows he's Batman, telling him to stop working late nights. Batman, Bruce Wayne hints to Amanda Waller that she should shut down the Suicide Squad, Task Force X. Mainly because I think he thinks it's volatile. And maybe not always fully under her control. And he says, if you don't do it, my friends will do it. So you see that Bruce Wayne is talking about friendship. Amanda Waller, she's talking about leverage. You even hear her talk about leverage. But we realize in this movie that leverage does not go but so far. We saw how leverage worked against Enchantress. We saw leverage worked against Amanda Waller. And Enchantress got out from under a spell. And even though Amanda Waller has succeeded with the Suicide Squad so far, there's always somebody who will backstab you. Whereas guys like Deadshot, he's got loyalty, just like a gang leader and gangs that have loyalty. There's a lot of loyalty to Deadshot as a leader. There's a lot of loyalty to Rick Flagg as a leader because this is a friendship. And these guys, they know they're going to be looking out for the best interests of the team. So basically, that's Amanda Waller's story arc. She's a leverage person. She tries to cover her butt. She actually was leveraging with Bruce Wayne his information that he needed to get on metahumans because he wanted to get as much information as he could on metahumans. He got it from Amanda Waller in exchange for him silencing people who may want to investigate what happened at Midwest City. And so these are all the story arcs inside of Suicide Squad. A lot of stories going on with a lot of different people, but on the blanket of a very simple story plot. And that's why the story plot couldn't be too elaborate because you had to introduce all these different characters and you had to also tell their stories. And that was the beautiful thing about Suicide Squad. Now, some people said it was a mumble-jumbled mess. I disagree again because the storyline was very simple. So I think the critics never quite understood this story because they defined a story arc a certain sort of way. And this story was not about that. It was still about movement. It was still about growth. But in terms of bonding, friendship, understanding of commonalities between people, and seeing people for who they are. Seeing villains as having more dimension than just a villain and just evil. Seeing the difference between friendship and leverage. Seeing the difference between honor among thieves and how a dishonorable person could become honorable, sharing commonalities with other people. So that's what this movie was about. Now, like I said, we had this character, the Joker, and people were saying, oh, there's not enough Joker in this movie. But the Joker served simply to show the love interest of Harley Quinn. And we were seeing the Joker from Harley Quinn's eyes. So he wasn't a major character in this movie. And a lot of people expected him to be, but that didn't make sense. It wouldn't have helped the story in terms of the relationship of the squad members with each other, which was more important. This movie was all about relationships, right? And so That's why you got all this chemistry. The story was not so much about Enchantress. It wasn't so much about the world that they were living in. It wasn't even about how logical these characters behave, because Captain Boomerang is one of the most illogical characters you could ever have. He has a coat full of all kinds of stuff. He gathers all kinds of things: boomerangs, money, jewelry, pink unicorns, you name it, he has it in his coat, which is just not realistic, right? He's kind of more of a comic book character, and that's why he probably provided some of the comic relief. But at the end of the day, it was about his humanity. And that's what John Ostrander was striving to do. I believe the critics did not get that. They didn't understand that this was not a movie they've seen before. This is not Guardians of the Galaxy. This is not a movie where it's about redemption. This is a movie about friendship, camaraderie amongst thieves. And that's a different kind of dynamic, but yet all humans, all of us, share the desire to be understood and to share commonalities between ourselves. And that's the humanity of it, and it's transformative. And that was the point behind this movie. So I decided to do this spoiler-filled review. Now, let me just say a couple things about the movie, and I'm done. The other thing I want to say about the movie is that the editing was just fine. This is a punk kind of movie. This is targeted for younger audiences. It had a fresh way of presenting itself that you've never seen in any filmmaking. So when people talk about the editing was rough and so on, this is not your standard film. It's not to be judged as a standard film. Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction wasn't to be judged like a standard film. It was considered pure genius. This film is also pure genius. And I know David Ayer, he will get that commendation later on. The musical scores of this film were interjected very nicely into the film, infused, giving the backstory. Some of them were more pronounced than others. Again, very rebellious at certain times, and at certain times, again, you use the orchestral score to give that kind of orchestral feel that is necessary. But the important thing to understand about the music in this movie is that it had attitude. So some of you guys will like it, some of you guys won't like it. It's unapologetic. The directorial style is unapologetic, just like the characters in the film. This film, Suicide Squad, on every single level represented the Suicide Squad. It was fearless. It was unapologetic. It was very creative and colorful, like the different diverse characters. It was a film that was not so much caring if it went in a linear fashion. It would tell you its story how it felt like telling you its story. Yet it was loyal to the squad members. It was loyal in its portrayal to the comics of the squad members. It was the deepest character developed film ever put to screen of the Suicide Squad. It beat back Assault on Arkham by miles when it comes to the character development of the characters, as you clearly can see from what I described. So the editing was fine. The music was fine. The story was simple enough to put in all of these beautiful story arcs in there. And more importantly, the movie was not about the villain, or what you call the main villain, which was not the main villain. By the way, Enchantress is not the main villain. The main villain is Amanda Waller. But nonetheless, it wasn't about Enchantress and Incubus. This film was about Katana. It was about Deadshot. It was about Harley Quinn. It was about Captain Boomerang, Rick Flagg, Diablo, and Killer Croc, and the lieutenant of Captain Boomerang. People say, well, some of the characters didn't have enough screen time. That's not true either, because I gave you the story arcs of all the characters. And acting is not, that's another thing I need to say. Acting is not just done in verbalization. It's not about saying a whole bunch of things. It's about making your words count, and sometimes saying absolutely nothing. Sometimes it's a stare, a glimpse. So how this film was edited was economical. Yes, the pace of the film was a little bit faster than usual. The scenes were a little shorter than usual. But that's what makes you want more. And what I've heard from the audience, a lot of people, they said, we need more Joker. We need more of Killer Croc. We need more of Captain Boomerang. We needed more of Katana. And when people are saying they want more, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. It whets your appetite for seeing these squad this squad together. And also seeing these villains operate as villains in a movie so you can get the understanding that they are villains. All right? This movie minimized the amount of bad things these people did. But you can see from their characters that they're really bad people. Just that they happen to have a common understanding between each other. But things could get really volatile really quickly with them if they didn't have bombs in their neck and they didn't get to know each other as they did. So I thought that this was a really outstanding film. And one of a kind. I rated 8.9 out of 10, like I said before. It's a very unique film. It's not your typical storyline. It's not your typical story arc. This is not Guardians of the Galaxy. The only thing it probably has in common with Guardians of the Galaxy is that Guardians of the Galaxy had an innovative soundtrack. And this has an innovative soundtrack. And they don't even have the same kind of soundtracks, right? And the soundtrack kind of played more or less throughout the movie. That's about it. In terms of this movie and Guardians of the Galaxy, they're completely different movies. This movie is more like the Dirty Dozen. It's not like the Fantastic Seven, because the Fantastic Seven was about criminals that found redemption in their actions. This is not about redemption. This movie is not about redemption. Some of the characters seem to be about redemption, but it's really more about the relationship of the characters and their sacrifice because they've found commonalities between each other. This is not about redemption. This movie's not about that. So I hope you like my review. In terms of the technical aspects of filmmaking, I will say this about filmmaking so you guys will understand me. Filmmaking, if you just go watch my video on good and bad films. All right? If you know anything about Vertigo, Alfred Hitchcock's film, it was critically panned. All right? Alfred Hitchcock lived his life and died. And this Vertigo was done in 1958. He lived his life and died believing that Vertigo wasn't a good movie. After his death, Vertigo has become one of the best-selling films of Alfred Hitchcock. The world caught up with what Alfred Hitchcock was doing in Vertigo. It was, again, sharp. It seemed muddled. You were moving from one scene to a flashback to this, to that, to the other. They couldn't understand the art of Vertigo and what it was creating and how it imitated reality. And Vertigo is a beautiful example of a film not being understood by the critics because they are too narrow-minded and they stay with the classical methods of filmmaking. And what Warner Brothers is challenging them to do with this young list of indie directors who have did some low-budget films and are now going into these big-budget blockbusters is that filmmaking can be diverse. A story can be told many different ways. There is no perfect way to tell a story. There is no grade you can give in storytelling. What's important is that the story is communicated and that people receive it and enjoy it. I would know because I'm a musician and I tell stories. And that's why I appreciate Suicide Squad. I appreciate Batman v Superman. I appreciate Man of Steel. Sometimes we need stories that help us to think about the reality we are in. And that's what these movies do. So, I'm looking forward to Wonder Woman. I know the story is going to be deeper than it's advertised as. I hope, though, that one thing I will tell Warner Brothers not to do, don't just release everything in your trailers online. Hold back a lot of stuff. And just give a little snippet to get people anxious. I know you guys want to rake in a lot of money very quickly in one space of time, and then the rest of the money that comes on is okay. But you want to make back your money really fast. I get it. But at the same time, don't get people so hyped for the trailers. And then when you see the movie, a lot of what happened in the trailers, the nice sweet spots are in the movie. And you're like, yeah, it was great, but it wasn't the greatest movie ever. When you hold back some of this stuff and people see this stuff in the cinema, then they say it's the greatest movie ever. Take a page out of Marvel in that, and take a page even out of Universal and some other industries where they do trailers which just repeat the same thing over and over. Just do that. Don't show everything, especially coming near to the time. Don't show everything. Just hold it back so that people can be wowed a bit. Because I think that's the beauty of making. Now, for the fans and for people, don't go into a movie with expectations. When you go into a movie with expectations, oh, this is going to be the greatest movie ever. Oh, it's going to be like The Dark Knight. Stop it. Go into a movie and just let the movie tell you its story. Be receptive to what the movie is doing. Then, after you get the story that the movie was trying to tell you, then you can criticize it. I always tell a film critic to go watch a movie at least 2 times. 3 times is the ideal thing. 3 times because you must get what the movie's saying. If you're trying to get into a movie to nitpick it and see all the faults, you're going to miss the story. Don't go in trying to nitpick a movie. And especially when critics give a movie a bad rating, everybody goes in to nitpick the movie because they feel it's trash. When it's not trash, you have to go in, let the story tell its story. After the story has told its story to you, then you can evaluate it. You don't go in with the attitude that you've already judged this movie because somebody else has said something about it. So a lot of you people lie when you say, I go in to see the movie with an open mind. You can't go in to see a movie with an open mind and it's 26 on Rotten Tomatoes. Don't even go there. Even I didn't go in with an open mind. I was wondering what's wrong with this movie for at least the first couple of minutes of the movie. Okay? It's going to affect you. But let the movie tell its story. Don't try to give it a story. Don't try to say, oh, I saw this movie. I saw Assault on Arkham, so it's going to be like that. No, let the movie tell its story and judge it on the merits of what it's told. And that's the problem with a lot of you critics. When I scrutinize what you're saying, when I start to ask you questions, you don't have answers for me. So you don't even understand what you've seen, but you want to critically analyze it, and you call it muddled and so on. You can't do that. The first thing you must do is understand what the story was trying to do and lay it out for people to know. And then you can start with your critiques. A lot of you critics don't do any homework for comic book movies. You're lazy. You want to go inside of the movie room and say, oh, well, I'm supposed to judge this as a film. It's called a comic book movie for a reason. I don't care if it's Captain America Civil War or what it is. Pick up the literature and do a little research. Okay? The people who did the movie had to do a hell of a lot more research than you did. Pick up the damn literature. At least know something about the lore before you go into the movie. God damn it, man. People are so lazy these days. Why I say that is because you're a movie critic. At least, if it's a comic book movie, at least know something about it. Because there's a lot of literature out there. Now, some people are proud to say, well, when I go in a movie, I'm supposed to understand everything. No, you don't have to understand everything. But if you do some homework, then you'd understand what's going on. Because this is a different kind of genre. And you cannot judge comic book movies the same way as you would judge a theatrical performance of an operatic play. Or something that Steven Spielberg would do. Or something that, a Pulp Fiction movie like Quentin Tarantino. They're not the same. So, yeah, as a film, it must be self-explanatory. Yes, as a film, it must be something which you can follow. But don't give me that you couldn't follow it because you were preoccupied nitpicking it and you still did not even go into the lore to understand a thing. If you're going to go into a nitpick a film and not even listen to it, at least know the lore. Because God damn it, some of you are not even watching these movies. You come in with your preconceived notions and you're coming in to tear it apart. And you think that's being a good film critic. Hell no, it's not. Some of you need to get your critic license revoked. Because y'all have a rotten taste of movies. You have movies that everybody hates and you like them. And you give brilliant critical performances, 90-something%, and it flops at the box office. How the hell could you guys praise Ghostbusters and hate Suicide Squad It makes no fucking sense. Sorry, man. I get really pissed at the idiocy, and people actually defending this rubbish. I'm a learned person. I'm not one of those people who is flabbergasted with DC. I like Marvel movies too. But god damn it, man. Have some kind of dignity. If you're taking a paycheck from Marvel Disney, god damn it, man. If you love Marvel Disney and their standard, god damn it, man. This is not Marvel Disney. Stop judging these films as if the only way to make a film is how Marvel Disney makes it. That gets me sick. Okay? And I like Marvel Disney films. Don't get me wrong. But this is ridiculous. 3 really good movies, solid movies, with solid stories, have been panned by these critics. Movies that the audience actually is there for them and likes them. You guys need to give up on your bias, man. It's ridiculous. You're making it sound like storytelling, there's only one way to tell stories. That's narrow-minded and stupid. I'm done. You guys have a great one.